And by way of introduction, what I will do is I will provide, well, the first thing I would say is that the Greater Boston Reformed Baptist Fellowship is a church plant of heritage. Many of you should know that. We thank you for the prayers, and some of you, I've actually been logging in on Wednesday prayer meetings online. It's wonderful to be able to put faces to the names, and it's a privilege for us to be able to do that, to join you in prayer on Wednesdays. But many of you have not been able to get an update of the work in Boston, so it's really great to be here in person to share with you, and I'll walk you through a little bit of the work that is happening there. So the way at which, sorry, let me see if I can advance this. I don't think it's working. Yeah. So the flow of our time together would be as such. I'll first give some background about myself, mostly about my family. This is going to be the briefest one because it's not about me. But then I want to dig into the work in Boston itself, the background of Boston City, and then I'll give you a bit of the history of the fellowship, the Greater Boston Reformed Baptist Fellowship. Why do we call ourselves Greater Boston Reformed Baptist Fellowship? Why don't we call ourselves a church? And the reason is because we're still a church plant. We have not covenanted together or constituted together as a local body. So we are still a fellowship, but eventually, Lord willing, our intention is to be able to covenant together as a local church. And then after that, I will finish up with some things that you can be praying for us specifically. And then I want to make sure I leave some time for question and answers. So with that, sorry, it's not, there we go. A little bit of a background about myself. So many of you know my name is Po. Po is actually my last name. Yetrin Po is my full name, but people remember Po much better, right? There is Teletubbies Po, there's Kung Fu Panda Po, there's Winnie the Pooh, so it's much easier to remember Po than my first name, Yetrin. So I was born and raised in Malaysia. Sorry, I can't advance the slide. It's not detecting. Yeah. So I was born and raised in Malaysia. I came here when I was 18 to the United States. I've been living here in the United States for about 21 years now, so more than half my life has been here in the United States. I was trained as a mechanical engineer, and currently I work as a scientist in the biotech industry. I was baptized when I was 19, and many of you, if you remember when we were added to the membership of Heritage Baptist Church, we had shared our testimony. So I'm not going to go through that in too much detail because I really want to focus on the work, the church plant in Boston. My wife, Michael, whom you'll be meeting today, she was attending school in Michigan as well. So that's where we met. We met actually at church in Michigan. And we have now been blessed with 3 children plus 1 coming in May. So she's pregnant, and our 4th child is due in May. So those are some pictures of our kids, just recent Christmas. The bottom left is May, my daughter's, or Grace. Her middle name is May. We call her by her middle name, May. That's her 4th birthday. Next slide, please. All right. So I want to give you a little bit of background as far as the city of Boston is concerned. Next slide, please. So many of you know that Boston is a historical city. I don't know whether you can see the text that is up there. There are some interesting facts that I wanted to share with you. The city of Boston itself is actually quite small in terms of land mass. There are only about 50 square miles of land mass. And the actual residents that live in Boston proper itself is not very many. It's only about 1 million people. But there are these surrounding areas that make up the greater Boston area, and that constitutes the majority of the city. So there's Cambridge, there's Newton, there's Arlington, all those cities surrounding Boston proper itself, all those make up the greater Boston area. And that population adds up to about 8.4 million people. It makes it one of the most populous regions in the United States. So whenever we say Boston, Boston City itself is quite small. However, the greater Boston area is quite a big area. And the other interesting fact is that, yes, the population of Boston City itself is only about 1 million, but during rush hour, people from all the surrounding cities will go into the city to work, and the population quadruples during working hours. And then when people are done, they just leave and they go back to the surrounding suburbs. But the total population is about 8.4 million people in the greater Boston area. The Northeast, the New England area, the Northeast region of the United States, is actually considered one of the least church region in the United States. It actually hovers only around a meager 2% of evangelical Christians. And I'm not talking about Reformed Baptists or Reformed churches or anything like that. I'm talking about just evangelical. It is one of the least Bible-minded regions of the United States. In fact, some people have considered it as an unreached area within the United States. It was once the center for Reformed evangelical truth. But now the New England area is classified as unreached by some. The greater Boston area is really a spiritual graveyard. If you guys have been to Boston, you will know what I mean. It's a very liberal place. It is a very self-centered, with all the higher education institutions there. It is truly a place where they puff themselves up with knowledge and they push away God. Next slide, please. So, the church plant, the Greater Boston Reformed Baptist Fellowship, is located in Cambridge itself. It's not in Boston City proper. But if you were to take the subway, it's connected. You take the red line to Central Square. It's smacked right in between Harvard and MIT. So Boston is known around the world for its colleges, for its universities. And of course, the leading universities there, such as Harvard and MIT, lead the charter when it comes to education, but also in terms of liberal worldviews. There are actually a total of 35 colleges and universities around the area. It makes Boston, or the whole greater Boston area, a melting pot of different cultures, different nationalities, different languages. You can walk down the street and you hear many different languages from different nations, all coming from different areas of the world. And they're all there in Boston because of the education system. But that also makes it one of the most liberal places in the country, in fact, in the world. Harvard University, for example, it's many people, when you say Harvard University, it stands for this prestigious institution of higher education. It's the pinnacle, if you can say, of academic prestige. But it is also unashamedly one of the most secular and liberal institutions. And it is also one of the institutions that pushes the most secular and most liberal worldview. Why do I actually say that? How do I actually get that statement? Take, for example, just recently, 3 years ago now, or maybe 4 years ago now, Harvard, they appointed a new chaplain. They actually have a church within, they had a chapel within the Harvard campus itself. And they appointed a new chaplain that is an open atheist. Harvard appointed a chaplain that is an open atheist. And during the hire of this atheist chaplain, this new chaplain says, we don't look to God for answers. We just need to look among ourselves for answers. That is the state of Harvard. And that is the state of the higher education institutions there in the greater Boston area. So how do we actually stay faithful? How do we actually steward this opportunity in this context that we are in the greater Boston area? So I gave you a few statistics here. Boston is a very transient city as well. So as you can see, it has, in the Cambridge area itself, there's about 1.2 to 1.3 million people. But a lot of the people in the Boston area, at least in the city center, in the Cambridge, Newton, Arlington, those areas, a lot of them, have you guys heard of the word DINGS? Double income, no kids. DINGS. There are a lot of those people. So it's not a very family conducive area. It's very expensive. It's very trendy. There are all these coffee shops that you go to if you're hootie tootie or the bouger kind of drinks that you would go for. But that is the type of city that we are in, and it's also a very transient city whereby people are there either for education, colleges, or they're there for work. And if they're there for work, what's there to hold them there? If the work sends them somewhere else, they leave. Or if there's a better opportunity, they leave. So it's not a very family conducive, it's not a place at which you really grow roots in. So we are in that kind of situation whereby the median income is extremely high, very highly educated, very, how would I put it, very populous in the sense that they think themselves that they are at the top of the world. But it is exactly those kind of people that need the gospel. It is exactly those people that actually think that they know all, but they don't realize they're still living in darkness. So that leads me to the next point, which is the history of the Greater Boston Reformed Baptist Fellowship. Next slide. I'll give you a little bit about the history of the church plant, and then I will share a little bit more about what you can be praying for us. Next slide. So the Greater Boston Reformed Baptist Fellowship. We are a church plant of Heritage Baptist Church, but how did we actually come about? What was our origins? We started gathering as a small group in our house in Quincy back during the pandemic days. If you guys still remember the COVID-19 pandemic, right, where everyone was wearing masks. But in Boston, being such a liberal city that it is, during that time, all the churches were shut down. Churches were not allowed to gather. You're not allowed to worship on Sundays. So what did? We opened up our home. We invited our friends over. We welcomed them to come join us for a time of fellowship in our home, where we would actually provide them with lunch, and then we started watching sermons online. We started watching debates online, documentaries online, and we started to realize that, hey, this was growing. We were getting about 15 people on a regular basis, and even after the shutdown was lifted, where the churches were allowed to open, we continued having that fellowship at our home. And it became a very wonderful, sweet time whereby people came. They would stay for lunch, some would stay for dinner, and some would even stay until 10, 11 p.m., where I just tell them, you guys keep going, I'm going to bed, But it's really, I think back of that time, and it was really a sweet time of fellowship, and it was a really wonderful time. So that fellowship kind of grew, right? We started singing hymns together, and then we started having a Bible study. And one of the first things that we did was to work through the 1689 London Baptist Confession of Faith. So we worked through paragraph by paragraph, sentence by sentence, systematically. And it took us about a year and a half just to work through the 1689. So eventually, this became a weekly Sunday afternoon fellowship. Then the discussions that we had really led us to the realization there's really no truly confessional Reformed Baptist church in the entire metropolitan Boston area. You need to drive at least an hour out of the city in order to get to the closest confessional Reformed Baptist church. So over the years that I was there in Boston, when I was still working there, when I was still a student there, I was part of this Calvinistic Baptist church. But I started to yearn for deeper teaching. I wanted something more, especially my younger children as they started to grow up. What kind of input were they getting from the church? When are we going to dive deeper into theological, concrete, solid food instead of just milk that is being fed week in and week out? So my children, as they grew up, I really didn't want them to learn, for example, hey, there is still a continuation of the gift of tongues. That was actually something that was taught in the Sunday school, by the way. So it was a Calvinistic Baptist church, but yet they were continuationists, and they believed that, hey, there are still gifts, and we didn't want our children to be learning those. So we realized that there was truly a need for a confessional Reformed Baptist church. So in January 2022, under the oversight of Damansara Reformed Baptist Church, that is, by the way, the church at which I was baptized in. I came from Malaysia. I was born and raised in Malaysia. My father was the pastor there. He has since retired. But we really started off with that in mind, where, hey, the church in Malaysia was giving the oversight. We do want to acknowledge that, hey, there is no such thing as a rogue Christian. You should not be planting a church by yourself without any oversight. We wanted to be held accountable. We wanted to make sure that the things at which we are teaching is not something that is just, off tangent or haywire. We wanted to be held accountable, and we wanted to make sure that we are doing it in a biblical way. So the church in Malaysia gave the oversight. And of course, there were many challenges. When we started this church plant, when we decided to corporately gather together for worship, there were some that actually decided that this is not what I wanted. I wanted just a time of fun and fellowship to pat each other, in the back. And now you're saying that you're going to gather together to corporately worship and start a church. I'm not going to be part of that. So there were quite a number of people that actually left us who were part of the fellowship in our home. So we press on faithfully nonetheless, and the Lord has been good. We have been encouraged by the numbers that have grown, and some have dwindled. Given how transient Boston is, there have been people that come and go. At one point, we were having a group of regulars of around 15 people, but then after that, it kind of dwindled down. So now we are having an average attendance of around 10 people every week. And every Sunday, we meet at the YWCA in Cambridge. So not the YMCA, but the YWCA. We rent a hall at the YWCA. And even that itself, it's a story. We actually went knocking on doors asking for a place to rent. Boston being how expensive real estate is, we just couldn't afford any place. And this was the last place that we decided, okay, if we knock on this and if it doesn't work out, we take it as the Lord's will. We knocked on the door, and they were, in fact, very welcoming. They said, oh, yes, there is this hall that was available. There was actually in fact, it was an LGBT group that was gathering here on Sundays, but because of the pandemic, they stopped. So it's available for rent. And it was very reasonable. So we decided, yeah, this is a door that the Lord has opened, so we went forward with it. So it's been 4 years that we have been gathering at the YWCA. In fact, there was a burst pipe sometime last year, or maybe 2 years now, 2024, so 2 years now, where we actually had to move for a short period of time to the Cambridge Community Center. I think Brother Corey preached there when he was visiting Boston. But when we actually moved there, we had to hunt around for all these different places just to find a temporary location to worship in. And every place we went to required us to affirm LGBTQ ideology before they would actually let us use that space. And this Cambridge Community Center was the only one that we were able to find that didn't require that affirmation. But it was quite interesting during that 6-7 months that we were gathering there for worship, waiting for the burst pipe at the YWCA to be fixed. They actually had LGBTQ communities side by side with us. There would be times when they would actually cover the bathroom doors, say it now becomes unigender, everyone can use any bathroom, that kind of thing. So that is the environment at which we were worshiping in, right? And then in 2024, the oversight was handed over to Heritage Baptist Church. I have to say, however, Heritage Baptist Church has been involved ever since the beginning of the church plant. Your previous pastor, Earl Blackburn, he was very instrumental in the starting of the church. I would say, if not for his support, we probably would not have gone ahead with this church plant. He was so encouraging. He was so supportive, and his wise counsel was so appreciative. So you can then see that in 2024, it was a natural transition whereby the elders of Heritage and the elders of Damansara Reformed Baptist Church in Malaysia, they met over Zoom, they talked, and then it was formally transferred over to Heritage Baptist Church about 2 years ago. So we have been a church plant of Heritage Baptist Church for nearly 2 years now. And it's been a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful experience. The elders here, I can't thank them enough, for the support, the prayers, the counsel that they have provided. They have been truly an anchor for the church plant there, and not just for myself, my family, but also for the people there. And you can see some of the pictures here that I shared. This was 2 years ago when we actually were here. We gathered at the Nichols place, and it was a wonderful time of fellowship. And then you can see on the far right there is Pastor Paul Haynes at the statue of John Harvard. John Harvard statue is also called the Statue of Three Lies. Why is it called the Statue of Three Lies? Because the first lie is because at the bottom there, you might not be able to see it in this picture, it says founder. He was not the founder of the university. The university was named after him, but it was actually started before that. It was called the College of Newton, and John Harvard donated his library to the college, and therefore they named it after him. So that was the first lie. The second lie is that the dates of his birth and death were actually wrong. So that was the second lie. And then the third lie of this statue is that there is no image of John Harvard that exists. The person sitting there is just a model. So that is the Statue of Three Lies. And it's sitting right at Harvard Square. And that's Pastor Haynes taking a picture with it. Next slide. Yeah, so I wanted to share a little bit about the work there and the people there. This is really to provide you a face to the names, because some of you may actually have seen on Wednesdays, there will be some people who have called in during the fellowship, during the prayer meetings. It will be helpful for you to know and to see some of the faces, and sorry for the distortion. I didn't realize that the formatting was going to be off. But if you can see, for example, here at the top left corner, this lady here has been one of the most faithful. Helen is her name, Helen Hutchinson. Helen was one of those that was with us during the time of the pandemic. When we opened up our home, she was one of those that came and fellowshiped at our home, and she has stuck on with us for the past 4 years, faithfully coming every week. And in fact, she comes from a Presbyterian background as well. And then the second one here, Kitty. Kitty, she has a very interesting story. She came to faith about a year ago, September of 2023. So about a year and a half ago. She did her undergraduate at MIT, and she's now doing her master's at MIT. Very smart, very intellectual. But it really was the gospel whereby she was brought to her knees. She was a practicing Buddhist at one point. She was a practicing Muslim at one point. She was trying to find her way out, realizing that her life was just at pit bottom. And she tried to find a way out with all kinds of other religions to work her way out of it, only to realize that every time she tries, she fails. she was a Muslim, whereby she would try to pray 5 times a day. And she realized that there was no satisfaction in her until she really came to faith in Christ alone. And it was amazing, whereby she actually had an internship 3 years ago with a friend from Colorado who was a Christian. And there were all these things that this friend had shared with her 3 years ago that just flooded her mind. And she picked up the phone and called him and said, "Can you tell me more?" And that is how she actually came to faith. And she has now been one of the most faithful, coming to our fellowship week in and week out. Still a student at MIT, but really a true joy to have her. There's another one here, Victoria, up there. Victoria, you can see as well. Victoria actually just graduated from Boston College. She was a law student, so she has gone back, and she just got married Thanksgiving of this year. Of last year, 2 months ago. So she now lives in Santa Monica. So she moved away. So that was a loss to us, one of the regulars. Over here, you can see what a Sunday school is like for children. It's basically just our kids. There's no other kids there. So Michael, my wife, and our 3 children, they do Sunday school while I set up the sanctuary and I set up the hall, the tables, the chairs, and things like that. Every Sunday, we also go and do outreach. So on Sunday afternoons, we go to the MIT campus where we will give out tracts, we will share the gospel, and there have been many occasions where the gospel was clearly shared, and we have had very many interesting conversations. And we trust that even if it doesn't add to the church, the seed would have been sown. The Lord will bring about someone else to water, but we just want to be faithful to that. And we also don't want to just be random in terms of how we go about our outreach. We want to go about it in a systematic approach. So we try to do it on every Sunday. We go to the MIT campus at the same time. And at some point, you realize that the faces that you see, the students that you see, they are the same faces. And then you recognize them, "Hey, Jackson," still not a Christian, but they know you. They still recognize you. They know that you're going to be there. Well, there's this guy from Grenada. I'm sure some of you don't even know the country of Grenada. Wasim from Grenada, Christian. I actually asked him, "Do you know whether you're going to heaven or hell?" And he says, "I'm going to heaven." I said, "Why are you going to heaven?" And he clearly articulated, "Because of Christ's death on the cross for my sins and his righteousness imputed unto me." Clear confession of faith there. But from Grenada, I didn't even know what that place was. I had to Google it when he was telling me. But that is the melting pot that Boston is in. MIT engineer, mechanical engineer, so I was able to connect with him, talk to him about the gospel, and he has been to the church. He's not a regular attendee, but he has been to the fellowship and attended some of the worship service. Because Boston being such a transient point and also a melting pot, there are a lot of visiting people that pass through Boston. So over here you can see Oliver Winkle. He's a pastor from the UK, in Bradford, UK. He's actually the pastor of the church at which John Bunyan was attending back in the 1600s, but he's the pastor right now. So Oliver Winkle and his family are here in Boston. And then over here, Pastor Jagan from Sri Lanka, a Reformed Baptist pastor from Sri Lanka. He was passing through Boston, and he was able to share a bit of the work in Sri Lanka. And of course, Earl Blackburn, you guys know. Over here, you can actually see this was the largest group that we actually had when Earl Blackburn was preaching just a few months ago. We had more than 30 people attending, but that was the largest we actually had when Earl Blackburn was there. This is our home, the top right corner. This is where we gathered for some fellowship. In our house, we try to do that once in a while, where we invite the people over to our home. We don't live in the city itself. We live a little further south, about 30 minutes drive away from the city, in the town of Weymouth. So it's for those who live in the city, typically they don't own cars. They take the subway system or the public transport. So for them to actually make it out to our house, it's quite a hike. So we do that every once in a while. Next slide. So I want to leave you with this. What can you be praying for us for? The first thing I would ask is, do pray. Prayer is such a key element for this church plant. It's like the fuel needed to fire, to keep the work going. The Ephesians 6, it talks about the armor of God that you have to put on. But there are two offensive weapons. The two offensive weapons that is described in Ephesians 6 is the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God, and prayer. The Word of God and prayer are the two offensive weapons that is described in Ephesians 6. So pray, and the righteous who are praying, they will be powerful and effective, as James 5:16 tells us. So I would urge you, please pray for us. Pray for us whenever you can think of us, and on a regular basis. Pray for a church planter. You guys know that I work part-time. I have a full-time job. We need a full-time pastor. We have been actively seeking a full-time pastor to labor in the greater Boston area. So please pray that the Lord will provide the right man to lead this fledgling work. And then also pray for the work in Boston itself, right? That the Lord will build up his house, that in due time a truly confessional Reformed Baptist church will be established. And then thirdly, pray for the outreach effort. So we have been sharing the gospel with many people on the MIT campus, and also even in our personal interactions. There have been some families that we have been trying to minister to on a regular basis, week in and week out. We don't want it to be where, hey, I've done my job, I've shared the gospel, check that box. No, you keep sharing until they really reject you or they kick you out of your home. So we have been trying to do that, and please pray for the outreach effort. And then fourthly, pray for a more permanent and conducive facility. Those of you, the elders especially, who have been there, they would know that the facility that we have is basically just a hall that is maybe a quarter of the size of this sanctuary here. And that's it. There is no nursery, there's no kitchen, there's nothing. But that is still where we have our lunch, our fellowship lunch every Sunday. After service, we would actually gather together for lunch every Sunday. Even though there's no kitchen, we bring food, and we do that. And there's also no parking. We have had situations whereby they come, they try to visit. The family would go around the building for about 20 minutes and couldn't find parking, and they just leave. And what can we do? It's a city center. If you're not willing to pay $40 for parking, we don't have anything else. There are some public parking spots which are free, but you have to walk. You have to at least walk 5-10 minutes before you get it. And those typically fill up very quickly unless you come early in the day. And then finally, I would say to pray for my family, for myself, my family. I travel quite a fair bit for my work. And it's been quite a burden, to be able to juggle between the responsibilities of my work, my family, and the church itself. I was telling some people at the camp recently, just a few days ago, tomorrow we fly back to Boston, and then on Tuesday I have to fly out to Seattle for work. And then I'm coming back on Saturday, and I have to preach on Sunday. Monday I fly out to San Francisco. And I'll come back for a week, and then I'm off again to San Diego for another work trip. So it's been a lot of travel, and my time with family has been very limited. So I try to be back during weekends, but during the weekends it's really taken up by church work. So we really need a church planter. We need someone to really labor with us there. But also pray for my dear wife, right? She's the one who actually cooks every Sunday for everyone. Every Sunday she would cook and provide food for everybody. So it's also a burden on her, even though she doesn't say anything about it. So with that, I want to close with some questions and answers. We have 8 minutes left before 10:15. So are there any questions? Yes.
You talked about statistically such a low number of Christians in that area. Does that include
Mm-hmm.
right? So is that included in those numbers?
No.
Okay.
The 2% number that I gave was evangelical
Okay.
Christians. So not Reformed, just evangelical, right? This was the statistics by one of the organizations. I can't remember. I have to pull it up. But it does not include Catholics. There is quite a big Catholic community in Boston. There's quite a big Irish community. The Kennedys, for example. Big Catholic family, big prominent family in the Boston area. Still very prominent. The North End, especially, it's very Italian, very Irish, very Catholic. So, no, that number does not include the Catholics. Yes.
With the demographics being so heavily shifted post-graduate degrees, how does that, the educational difference impact how you need to reach those members?
Yeah, at the end of the day, we have to remember that the gospel is the one that actually convinces. You know, it's not how charming you are or how articulate you are or what your credentials are. You have to trust that the gospel message itself will do the saving work, right? Salvation is truly of the Lord, and our task is really to share. Doesn't mean that we should not share clearly. So many a times when we actually, and I try not to do this, but there have been times whereby during the outreach effort, there are people that come with degrees and say, what do you know? You know, I have a biology degree. You know, you don't know anything about creation. The fun fact is that I have a biology degree as well, you know, but I don't flaunt that or anything like that. I try to focus them back to the gospel. And many a times you realize that the more questions you ask, the more they realize they don't know. So you can always pick up hints of things whenever they ask you or whenever they actually respond to you. You pick up hints that you can then tackle them. So take, for example, when I ask them, hey, do you know whether there's a right or wrong? They say, oh yeah, there's a right and wrong. Who is it that defines the right and wrong? You know, is it you? Is it society? Or is it God that defines the right and wrong? What is fair? What is just? What is unjust? How can you actually say any of that based on science? Yeah, so the more they actually have a graduate degree, you can actually probe even more. Say, hey, you are a graduate student. You're supposed to be intellectually honest and challenging yourself. If you were to do research, whenever you do more research, do you get more answers or do you get more questions? Most of the time, people would know that the more research you do, the more questions you have. And that is the beauty and the nature of research. The more research you do, the more questions pop up, then you explore even more. So as you ask that next question, keep asking that next question, you end up becoming philosophical. Where is life from? What is life? What is right? What is wrong? All those questions, as you ask, next one, if you, even in physics, hey, an atom, where did that come from? How did all these particles come about? How did quarks come about? If you ask more and more questions, you realize that it becomes philosophical. Who made all this? Right? So even with all the graduate degrees, that there are, of course, it helps to have a graduate degree. I have had to flaunt it a few times, whereby I can tell them, saying that I can show you that my H index is higher than yours, and that H index is a citation index. How many papers you have published, how many people have cited you. I can tell them that, I bet you my citation index is higher than yours. Yes. Yeah, so as far as church planting candidates, or pastoral candidates are concerned, the Elders of Heritage has been really taking the lead on this. So the Elders of Heritage, Pastor Paul Haynes has been the one really doing the initial screening. We have had several applications, but many of them have not really passed even the sniff tests. Just looking at the resume, you know that this is not going to work. But there have been quite a few that actually have shown great promise. And then we follow up with phone calls. We follow up with Zoom calls. There have been some where after we had 1 or 2 Zoom calls, we realized that they're not truly confessional. Yeah. So as far as what the criteria are, we don't have a formal list, and maybe that's something that we can put together. That's not a problem. But really, to make sure that we are planting a confessional Reformed Baptist church. We don't want to just plug someone from, General Southern Baptist Church, or an Armenian church, or even like some Calvinistic churches that like Gospel Coalition and so on, that are very loosely Reformed and not truly confessional. So for us, it's truly looking for someone who is confessional, someone who is has the vision, and more importantly, the call to labor there in Boston, not just a job. Right? So we don't want someone who just treats it as a job where, hey, I got through this interview and therefore I got this job. No, but truly having that call, that urgency for the lost souls in the Boston area. And Boston being one of the most expensive places to live, of course, we also have to take into consideration, what are your needs? If you have a family of 10 children, it's a little challenging for us to support that. So all those things are taken into consideration as well. So I don't have a formal list per se, but I would defer to the elders of Heritage, if they have anything to add there. Any other questions? Well, if not, maybe we'll close in prayer.
Let's close in prayer. Thank you, brother. Let's give him a clap for presenting for us. Thank you, Brother Cole.